Hello and welcome to today's Battlemech review. Today we're going to be looking at another one of the original machines from the Clan Invasion with the Mad Dog. You will probably hear me slip and say Vulture quite a few times. The inner sphere designation is what I know this machine as mostly, which sometimes comes out as quite weird. You've got two different body kits here for the machine, and for the Mad Dog, well, there's quite a few different body kits available. You might not see a whole lot of different ones through this presentation because I've been mostly getting pictures of the more classical designs, but they come up in different versions quite often as a machine that's been around for a long time and a machine that hasn't really been replaced in a long time compared to all other Omni-Mechs who had different variations or different mechs to try to take them over. The Mad Dog has been around and stuck around. So let's get into it. The Mad Dog is a second generation Omni-Mech originally designed by Clan Smoke Jaguar around 2963. They wanted the name to be an insult to Clan Wolf and Clan Coyote, but I'm pretty sure neither of the clans really cared because they were also major purchasers of the design. In order to simplify construction and maintenance of the machine, the leg assembly on the Vulture is a scaled down version of what you would see on a thing like the Timberwolf, which was already quite popular at the time. When the Clan Invasion hit, everybody had massive amounts of the darn thing, with Clan Ghostbear and Clan Elzorz having the largest number of them in their Tomon. To be honest, once you start digging into it, the Mad Dog is actually an evolution from Clan Coyote's Lupus, which was actually the second Omni-Mech to ever enter production, at least from what I know and what I've been able to glean. The Lupus is a 60-ton fire support machine, at least in its prime configuration. I mean, it's an Omni-Mech. You can change it to fit what you need it to do. And it packed 40 racks of Artemis-guided LRMs and a pair of ER medium lasers for short-range support. It was able to jump and showcased that you could mount jump jets into pods even on first-generation Omni-Mechs. You can't always. You have to look at what's available. And it was good enough in its particular role to be able to replace things like the Bombardier and the Archer. It came back into production recently. Clan Sea Fox has been building a few, and the Spirit Cats have been using them more than some of the other groups out there. But you can see here the inspiration which led to the Vulture. On the flip side, well, the Vulture became one of those machines that was so popular that it had multiple refits and rebuilds over the year. You still see quite a few original Mad Dogs that were originally built in the Clan Homeworlds or based on the same design. But nowadays, you will also see a lot of the very common Mark II, which was built by Clan Ghostbear from their company at Bergen. That particular design is mostly a cosmetic difference, and some of the pods are moved around. You might often see the ones with the chin turret rather than boat lasers in the arms. That is just how the design is set up. The Bears did make a Mark III as well, which is a fairly fancy version of the Mark II in 3109. Once again, a variation of what's available and improvement on some of the internal components. And the Clan Sea Fox made their own with the Mark IV for exports and external use in 3137. This one uses the fancy ferrolamellar armor like the Timberwolf Mark IV, the Mad Cat Mark IV, or the Savage Wolf, depending on what you want to call it. It's a more direct evolution on the design. As the early invasion came on, the Kuritans started calling the Mad Dog Hagetaka, which the guys and gals at Comstar translated in their documents as Vulture because most of them can't speak Japanese. The core of the Mad Dog is a very simple 60-ton machine using a Not Vlar 300XL engine to go up to 86 kilometers per hour. You get a similar speed to things like the Ostsol, the Ostrock, and the early Dragon. You're a bit slower than the Grand Dragon at 60-ton. You're going to be able to keep up with those 50 and 55-ton medium mechs as well, at least on the inner sphere side of the border. You are faster than a lot of heavier mechs, at least in the inner sphere arsenal at the time. For the Clan Arsenal, it's quite reasonable as a speed. It's pretty much what all their heavy mechs were able to get as far as the speed goes during the invasion. This design is cooled by an integral 12 double heat sinks, which is often not enough, but you can add more through the 28 tons of reserved pod space for equipment, almost half the weight of the machine, which is perfectly reasonable. You get 8.5 tons of ferrofibrous plate on a standard chassis, which simplifies repairs. But I mean, if you start looking, that's not a whole lot of armor on a 60-ton mech. You're going to have to use that speed to defend yourself, basically. The targeting computer is a cat-size MD6, which is actually a very good targeting computer when combined with that particular OmniMech setup, which compensates for a lot of inaccuracy that you would get in that mid-range where most weapons are still good enough that they're going to hit, but you sometimes have a lot of bad luck if things go bad. This one here is going to compensate for that enough that you're going to be able to fire in that bracket really well. The prime configuration of the Vulture copies the earlier Lupus and is meant to replace things like the Bombardier and the Archer. Your main weapon are a pair of 20 rack LRMs in the shoulder mounts, but you only really carry 2 tons of ammo because you're not going to be fighting for very long, because you're meant to be fighting only in trials and short fights. At least that's what the clans thought they were going to have to do. Once the ammo runs out, you have a pair of large pulse lasers, which are always really good on the clan side, and a pair of medium pulse lasers, which are also fantastic on the clan side of things. If those were inner sphere grade, that would be entirely terrible. But here we have 2 extensively good laser weapons that might even be your primary weapons most of the time on the Mad Dog. You will overeat like crazy if you're not careful because you really don't have enough heat sinks, but you can do quite a bit with that particular machine as well. And since it's all pod-based equipment, you can move things around. Tango configuration is supposed to be recent and it copies the original, but I'll be honest with you, I've seen at least the great lines from that particular design in multiple other Vultures from the Clan Invasion era. Where the modernization really comes in is those shoulder launchers. Now they have 2 tons of reload each, giving you a nice balance of firepower. And the modern Tango version uses an Artemis 5 guidance to improve both on accuracy and clustering. During the Clan Invasion, the Artemis 5 didn't exist. You had Artemis 4s instead, and it saved you a ton, which was used to add either extra ammo or extra heat sinks. The arm setup is modified a little bit on those Tango/Clan Invasion refits there, using ER lasers, so a pair of ER large and a pair of ER medium lasers, giving you very nice sniping potential, but a loss in accuracy compared to those pulse lasers. You also have room for extra heat sinks to begin with, but you're going to need them with ER lasers that generally generate more heat. It's a balance kind of things. But here, the Invasion Era one with a pair of LRM-20s, Artemis 4, ER large, ER mediums, fairly commonly seen. This Tango configuration is probably just a variation on something that worked back in the days that someone decided to start selling as a more or less standard pod setup. Another retread of this is Delta configuration, which uses the fancier advanced tactical missile launchers. Each of your shoulder mounts that big 12-tube ATM with 3 tons of reload, so 1 of each of the standard round, allowing you to do barrages at all different ranges. You get that nice little chin turret there with a pair of medium pulse lasers, while each arm mounts an ER medium and ER small laser. You lose on the range of your lasers, but those missiles are going to be able to shoot even further than regular LRMs, and you get an extra double heat sink to help out with the management. This one is quite popular and very decent, and you're going to be able to engage targets at just about every range. Hotel configuration follows in these footsteps, using 15 rack LRMs in the shoulders with Artemis 4 guidance. You might not have as much damage potential on them, but with the improved clustering, you might actually be performing better than those larger LRM-20s. As with any good hotel configuration, the arms on this one will pack heavy lasers. On the right side, you have a heavy large lasers, which will deal tons of damage, but generate massive amounts of heat, while the left arm has a brace of 3 heavy medium lasers, which will give you very good punch. Do lose on accuracy on those heavy lasers, unless you replace them with improved heavies, which have a tendency to blow up if damaged. As a Omni-Mech, if you have the parts, you'll be able to rework it. You get 8 extra double heat sinks in order to keep up with the massive heat load that those heavy lasers are going to generate. This one is a very nasty brawler. Bravo configuration is a bit of an odd duck in that same family, but it does keep the big missile launchers in the shoulders. On one side, you get an Artemis 4 guided LRM-20 with a ton of reload, so you're going to be able to do some bombardments, while the other side has a pair of Streak 6-tube SRMs with a single ton of reload, which will run you a little bit tight, even though those are quite accurate and only fire when you have a perfect target lock. Your arms back the regular lasers, with one side having a pair of ER large lasers, while the opposite one has a trio of medium pulse lasers. This one really goes a little bit all over the place, but it's going to be able to be used as a decent brawler and a decent sniper as well. So it's a nice intermediate between all the previous models that we've seen. Uniform configuration is meant to go underwater, and this one uses 5 UMUs and R-Gel in order to make sure you're able to move underwater and that you do not die of a hull breach. Your shoulder mount large 15-rack long-range torpedo launcher with Artemis guidance, giving you very nice underwater firepower and longer range one. A lot of weapons underwater will have a shorter range. Torpedoes don't suffer that penalty. Each of your arm couple a medium pulse laser with an ER medium laser, which is a semi-successful setup, especially underwater where lasers are quite functional. This particular setup here, if you made some minor modifications to it, take out the R-Gel, add some heat sinks and ammos for the LRMs maybe, and you would be able to turn it into a ground unit with jump jets fairly easily, and it would be rather successful. We're not quite done with missile platforms yet. There's way too many of those when looking at the Vulture. Golf configuration features a set of Streak launchers with a Streak 15 on one side and a pair of Streak 6 on the other, but you only have that 1 ton of a reload for each of those sets, so you're not going to be doing that for very long. Backing this up is an ERPPC, which will allow you to decapitate people at long range, and as a last line of defense, you also have 3 ER medium lasers. Decent all-around design in the end. You're going to be able to stay in the fight long enough since those are Streak launchers. You just don't have that indirect fire option on the Streak 15. So you just have to behave a little bit differently than you might on a regular Vulture. Double Delta configuration is an odd one that actually first showed up on the game world of Solaris 7 as someone decided to bring a Vulture into the fray. This one tones down the Streak SRM launcher with a single one, and the other side packs a Artemis 4 guided LRM-20, which is always odd if you're going to be doing duels in the arena. For direct fire options, you get triple medium pulse lasers and an exciting 2 LB2X autocannons on the other, which is also entirely pointless when doing fighting in an arena. With a single ton of reload, well, who really cares? You will be able to load clusters or slugs, but those are LB2Xs. They're not going to be able to do anything in the long run. I'm really not a fan of this particular setup. Victor configuration doesn't mess around and brings an Arrow 4 artillery missile system to the table on one side. On the other one, you have a 20 rack LRM with 2 tons of reloads, so you do carry quite a few missiles there. Each arm feature an ER medium and a medium pulse laser for close range defense, and in all honesty, this is a very decent artillery platform that's going to be fairly mobile at 86 kilometers per hour. Maybe move things around a bit and put jump jets in, but that would require quite a few changes. It is an entirely functional artillery platform at that point. This finally covers all the missile batteries that are available on the Vulture standard configuration. Now let's look at what else is available, and we'll start with Charlie configuration, which is basically the most simple possible design. Each arm mounts a Gauss rifle, and each arm has 2 tons of reloads. It will move fast enough, it will snipe people, and you'll be able to decapitate things with those Gauss rifles. That's really about it, and that's enough in many cases. Echo configuration follows in the same footstep, but this time uses the massive Hyper Assault Gauss 30 in each arm. Unfortunately, you only have a single ton of reload for each of those guns, and a ton of reload on AG 30s is really not a whole lot of shots. It'll be a decent AA platform, but you won't be able to stay in the fight long enough to really make a difference. Foxtrot is a little bit smarter, using the smaller Hyper Assault Gauss 20 with 4 tons of reload, so you will be able to stick around quite some times, and you'll be able to do more or less the same thing as an AA platform, and it still deals fairly decent damage against other mechs. Each side torso mounts a pair of ER medium lasers, so you can stick around even when your ammo runs out. So this one is probably your better choice in that category. The good folks at Bergen and Clan Ghost Bear contacted me with their new double Foxtrot configuration. I don't have a picture of it. They sent me the design specs and a set of pods that I can install on a Vulture. But this one's a retread of the original Foxtrot, but all the weapons are now torso mounted. So you've got big shoulder AG 20s and heavy medium lasers as backup. Where it really differs is that the arm assemblies now mount a massive power fist, which can be used for brawling once things get into a close range. This one packs 6 tons of reload on those AG 20s. I'm not quite sure why I would go with that. I'd probably set up that chin mount with a pair of ER medium lasers to give you a little bit more laser punch here. I'm not the guys at Bergen. I'm just the guy fixing the mechs for them. The next big gun setup is a Sierra configuration, which does the same thing, but with energy weapons. Each arm is mounted with an ERPPC for sniping and blowing things up, and once things get closer, you get a pair of medium pulse lasers in the torsos. Where it really becomes a little bit odd is that this one actually mounts 5 jump jets, which is not standard on most Mad Dogs, but will allow it to be a nice mobile sniper. You also get an active probe in order to find hidden targets and improve your accuracy. So this is a very nice setup that most people don't expect the Vulture to be. Rolling back around, well, you've got Alpha configuration, which was really common during the invasion, and it can be fairly devastating in the right hands. Your direct fire weapons are an ERPPC on one side and an LB5X autocannon on the other, allowing you to carry both cartridges. Buckshots. The shoulder racks features missiles, just like a lot of the things we were talking about earlier, but this time it's 36 tubes of standard short-range missiles with 4 tons of reload. Basically, this is a Harmer Hunter. You're going to be using this to get close to a column of tanks and other tanks and just let loose. After you're done, there's really not going to be much of the vehicles that are going to be able to move, and most of them will probably even be crippled. India configuration packs a capacitor-powered ERPPC for a massive one-time oomph shot every once in a while. To back this up, you get a pair of rotary AC-2s, which are basically the only good version of the AC-2, with 2 tons of reload between them, which might run you a little bit tight if you just fire them at full rate of fire. Clan Rotary AC-2 as well have a better range than the Inner Sphere ones, even though they have the same weight, so they are really, really good weapons, all things considered. You get extra heat sinks as well to help you keep on shooting those things steadily, because a capacitor-powered ERPPC is going to run extremely hot. The real limitations of the Mad Dog is generally its thin armor and its limited cooling, which means it can become a liability in the more aggressive times we live in. There's a reason why the Mark III and the Mark IVs make things a little bit tougher or a little bit cooler. The fact that it's omnipresent in every Clan Toman, and I would say in just about every Inner Sphere unit nowadays, means that you will need to know how to manage them, and you will need to know how to fix them and equip them if you're an engineer or a commander. One thing you need to know, though, is that just because it has those limitations doesn't mean that a Mad Dog's a bad mech. And really look at it this way. The only mech that was seen to be good enough to replace the Mad Dog was an upgraded version of the Mad Dog. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you very much for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.